Do you have a hard time not only implementing, but maybe even sticking to dietary changes? Do you get overwhelmed by all the different nutritional advice out there? Are you someone who ultimately acknowledges that what you eat is important, but you don't want to spend all of your mental energy during the day obsessing about it? Well, my friend, if any or all of these apply to you, then this video is for you. Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a clinical nutritionist, and today we're going to be talking about 3 mindset shifts that have the ability to change your health, not just for next week, next month, but essentially forever. At this point in my life, I've coached hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals, helping them implement dietary changes and overcome obstacles that are challenges for them, whether that's in their relationship with food or just in showing up in the way that they would like to in order to reach their health goals. Now, this first mindset shift is so foundational, and it's going to be the thing that helps us get to those long-term outcomes. So stick with me on this one because it might seem like a fairly simple principle, but in reality, I don't think people realize how it's impacting their choices, particularly around food on a daily basis. So this first mindset shift is being consistent over being perfect. Essentially valuing consistency over perfectionism. You know that famous quote that says comparisons are the thievery of joy? Well, I like to say that perfectionism is the thievery of progress. You're a recovering perfectionist like me, then you may understand how this relates to many aspects of your life, but let's talk about it and how it relates to health for a moment. And all of the people that I've worked with, perfectionist mindset is the #1 thing that stops people from A, even getting started, and B, from making progress with their health. And I believe this is because when you come into things with an all or nothing mindset, when you do fall off the wagon of the diet or whatever it is you're doing, you're more likely to experience those negative emotions of guilt, shame, etc., and make that single experience contain so much more meaning than it needs to. And at this point, it's common to enter what is referred to as like a diet pendulum swing, where we come off of it, it becomes so much harder to get back on it, especially when getting back on it then gets put on this pedestal where we have to utilize all of this energy to amount to something like that. One very common thing I see happen with clients with a perfectionist mindset is they're more likely to engage in a game that I call digging the ditch deeper than those that don't have a perfectionist mindset. Based on the title, this might be a self-explanatory game, but I don't think a lot of people realize when they're playing it. This is when people fall off of a diet or make a choice that they might consider cheating, and cheating is a term that I'm gonna have to make a separate video on because that's a whole different mindset issue. But basically the thought process is after making this choice is, well, I've already fallen off the wagon, I already fell into this ditch, so I may as well use the rest of the day to indulge even further. But all ditches are not created equal. So while before it was a fairly shallow ditch that you could have easily crawled your way out of without any assistance from anyone, now you're at the point where you might need extra tools, you might need a rope, you might need a helping hand to help you get out of that ditch. The point is that perfectionism requires that we regain all this energy and effort that we generally don't have on a daily basis to hold ourselves to that high standard again. So maybe you've heard of the 80-20 principle. It applies to most aspects of life, and people's dietary choices, I would say, is very similar from all the people that I've worked with. Yes, there's always going to be the people that maybe need to be a little bit more like 90-10 or 95-5 if they're very sensitive to things, but over time, you'll find that the more consistent you are, the closer you get to the 80-20 principle. So don't let perfectionism rob you of making progress. Instead, if something comes up where you made a choice that wasn't aligned with your plans, ask yourself instead, what is the next best choice? Every day is a new day, and we actually eat 3 times a day. You don't even need to wait until tomorrow most of the time to make the next best choice when it comes to food and when it comes to your health. Number 2, the next mindset shift that is really going to help you with filtering out all of the conflicting information that you're receiving about foods. And this is having radical acceptance for the fact that foods are complex and they do not exist in good or bad categories. While yes, there are foods that we can generally agree upon that are less health promoting than others, like processed foods and chemicals and things made in a lab that, in my opinion, in certain circumstances do have some ill intent, like overriding your hunger and satiety cues so that you eat more of a food. But when it comes to whole foods, like vegetables, fruits, meat, legumes, nuts and seeds, grains, etc. Whether or not that they're going to be health promoting or less health promoting for you is entirely dependent on your biochemical individuality. So you likely see a lot of things on social media or read books about foods that have a very extremist mindset or a very strong opinion on certain aspects of food. And this gets attention, and these things are successful because we are drawn to extremes. We want to put things in a box. We generally don't like gray areas or territories, and I literally get asked one of these questions every single day as a nutritionist. Is kale bad now? Are nightshades inflammatory? Should I avoid lectins? Should I avoid high oxalate foods? The list goes on and on. And what people are generally looking for from me is a yes or no answer. What I explain to people is while there may be a certain degree of truth in everything that's said about a specific food, that doesn't mean that it applies to you or it's something that you need to worry about. If we avoided every single food that someone claimed had a harmful property, there literally wouldn't be anything left to eat. I figured we could go through one example together to get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So let's talk about kale. Kale has been thrown under the fire lately for being 1, a high oxalate food, and 2, for being a food that may contain higher levels of the heavy metal thallium. While it is true that vegetables in the green cabbage family, not just kale, can accumulate toxic metals in their leaves more so than other vegetables, the actual content of thallium depends upon the actual content of this heavy metal in the soil. So it doesn't mean that all kale contains high amount of toxic heavy metals. Can overconsumption of specific foods lead to problems in susceptible individuals? Absolutely. If you are someone who's fairly susceptible to kidney stone formations, then you might not want to be eating high oxalate foods all the time. But if that doesn't really apply to you, then maybe you want to consume kale in moderation with all of the other leafy greens that exist. Kale contains a lot of great micronutrients like vitamin K, C, folate, minerals like calcium, magnesium. It's a good dietary source of fiber, and it even contains some bioflavonoids, and bioflavonoids are particular compounds in foods that actually have some antidepressant properties. While I'm not here to represent kale, if you are concerned about heavy metals, you may not want to be juicing kale every day. But as you can see here, this food is not good or bad, it is complex. Just like people. So as much as we want to put people into a box and say that they're awful, they're toxic, the list goes on, we actually give a lot of power over to those people when we do that, when in reality, maybe our relationship with them led to a toxic dynamic and it's not a good fit, but that doesn't mean that they are 100% a horrible person. And I don't know about you, but when I accept these things about people and situations, it's actually far more easier for me to move forward without fearing that their presence in the world is something to be threatened by. You are intelligent enough to make informed decisions about the information you're receiving regarding food, but the mindset shift is to not allow these choices to stem from a place of fear, which I believe we are far more likely to do when we put foods into these good and bad categories. And this goes directly into the third mindset shift, which is, instead of fearing food, I want you to ask yourself instead, What am I getting out of this? People I've worked with that have a more complicated relationship with food are often the people that ask me a lot of personal questions about not only what I eat, but basically are always wondering how I reframe myself from eating certain foods. When in reality, I don't reframe myself at all. I just genuinely don't care. And I try and explain that this is a very slow mindset shift that happened over a lot of time, where I don't think a particular food is bad, and I might even choose to eat it every once in a while. But most of the time, I just don't have any interest in eating something that's not giving anything back to me and may even take things from me like my energy or my mental stability. It requires our bodies so much work and energy to digest foods, and yes, while at the end of the day, our bodies need calories more than anything else, but for all of the energy and work that my body is doing to digest and metabolize these foods, I want it to be the best stuff possible. I want to get something out of this relationship. And if we're going back to the relationship example, I don't want to continuously exert and give my energy away if I'm not getting anything in return. So maybe the food isn't bad, I don't fear it. I may not even be worried about the reactions I could have, because at the end of the day, I know that that would pass and I would be okay. I'm just more uninterested, and it doesn't really do a lot for me. I think this mindset shift is so important because whether you've developed a lot of food fear and therefore unnecessary anxiety, or are putting certain foods on a pedestal, be honest with yourself. What are you getting out of it? If the answer is joy or an overall positive one, then cool. I believe that when we answer this question honestly, we're more likely to take actions that are more aligned with the person that we want to be and are more aligned with our health goals long term. When you make food choices from this place as opposed to the fear, there is no FOMO. You're not missing out on anything. If you enjoyed this video, then let me know in the comments below which one of these principles resonated with you the most. And you may want to check out this video up here that YouTube thinks you would really enjoy. So hopefully I'll see you in that one.